What happens when Hollywood's most beloved action hero walks into what he thinks is a friendly late-night interview, only to discover the host has been lying in wait with a carefully orchestrated ambush designed to humiliate him on live television? What you're about to witness is the moment Arnold Schwarzenegger realized he'd been set up by Jimmy Kimmel in the most calculated way possible, and how the Austrian oak's legendary temper finally met its match in the form of a host who pushed way too far. This isn't just another celebrity interview gone wrong. This is the night television audiences watched a respected icon get systematically torn down by someone who was supposed to be on his side. Make sure you subscribe and drop a comment, because what unfolds here will completely change how you see late-night television forever. The green room at Jimmy Kimmel Live was unusually quiet that evening. Arnold Schwarzenegger sat reviewing his talking points, genuinely excited to promote his latest environmental initiative. He'd always enjoyed his appearances on Kimmel's show. The host had always been respectful, even playful in a good-natured way. Arnold appreciated that Jimmy never went for the cheap shots that other hosts sometimes attempted with aging action stars. "5 minutes, Mr. Schwarzenegger," the production assistant announced cheerfully. Arnold nodded, straightening his tie. He'd been doing television interviews for decades, but he still felt that familiar flutter of anticipation. Tonight felt different, though. Something about the energy backstage seemed off. The usual friendly chatter from crew members was replaced by hushed conversations that stopped when he walked by. Jimmy Kimmel paced behind the cameras, his usual pre-show routine, but there was an intensity in his movements tonight that his staff had learned to recognize. His head writer approached cautiously. "Jimmy, you sure about this approach tonight? Arnold's always been good to the show." Jimmy's smile was cold as he adjusted his tie. "Arnold thinks he can waltz in here and lecture America about climate change while driving around in military vehicles that get 3 miles to the gallon. Someone needs to call out the hypocrisy. But the research shows he actually converted most of his vehicles to run on biodiesel, and—" "I don't care what the research shows," Jimmy cut him off sharply. "I care about what plays well with our audience. Trust me, by the end of tonight, everyone will see Arnold Schwarzenegger for what he really is, another Hollywood phony." The familiar Jimmy Kimmel Live theme music began playing as Jimmy took his position behind his desk. His demeanor shifted instantly into the charming, self-deprecating host that millions of viewers loved. But tonight, there was something predatory lurking beneath that famous smile. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Terminator himself, Arnold Schwarzenegger." The audience erupted in applause as Arnold made his entrance, waving and smiling with genuine warmth. He'd always loved connecting with live audiences. Their energy was infectious. He settled into the guest chair, completely unaware of what Jimmy had planned. "Arnold, great to have you back on the show," Jimmy began, his tone friendly but with an undertone that Arnold didn't immediately pick up on. "You're here to talk about your new environmental campaign, Save the Planet Arnold, which is interesting because—" Arnold leaned forward enthusiastically. "Yes, Jimmy, this is something I'm very passionate about. We need to act now before it's too late for our children and grandchildren. The science is clear. We must transition to clean energy and—" Hold on," Jimmy interrupted with a chuckle that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm just curious, Arnold, about someone who owns multiple Hummer H1s lecturing the rest of us about saving the environment. Isn't that a little like Colonel Sanders promoting veganism?" The audience laughed, but Arnold sensed something off in Jimmy's tone. Still, he remained diplomatic. "Well, Jimmy, actually I converted most of my vehicles to run on biodiesel years ago. I practice what I preach, you know. It's about making better choices with the technology we have available." Right, Jimmy nodded, but his expression suggested he wasn't buying it. "So you're telling us that Arnold Schwarzenegger, the guy who made his fortune blowing things up in movies that probably had carbon footprints bigger than small countries, is now our environmental guru?" Arnold's smile tightened slightly. This wasn't the playful ribbing he was used to from Jimmy. I think everyone deserves a chance to grow and learn, Jimmy. I've learned a lot over the years about environmental responsibility. That's why I'm trying to use my platform to make a positive difference. A positive difference, Jimmy repeated mockingly. That's rich. Tell me, Arnold, how exactly does flying around the world in private jets to give speeches about reducing emissions make a positive difference? Doesn't that seem just a tiny bit hypocritical to you? The audience was starting to shift uncomfortably. This wasn't the fun, light-hearted interview they'd expected. Arnold could feel the mood in the room changing, and his legendary composure was beginning to crack. Jimmy, I think you're missing the point here, Arnold said, his accent becoming more pronounced as his irritation grew. Yes, I use transportation to get to these events, but the message I'm spreading reaches millions of people. The impact of inspiring others to take action far outweighs the carbon cost of travel. Oh, so it's about the greater good, Jimmy said with exaggerated understanding. Kind of like when you were governor of California and you commuted to work in a private jet while telling regular citizens to carpool and take public transportation? Arnold's jaw tightened. That's not accurate, Jimmy, and I think you know that. My travel as governor was necessary for state business, and I offset those emissions through various environmental programs. Offset, Jimmy laughed harshly. There's that magic word. You can do whatever you want to the environment as long as you pay some money to plant a few trees somewhere else. It's like environmental indulgences, isn't it? Buy your way out of responsibility. The audience was now completely silent, sensing the genuine hostility radiating from their usually affable host. Arnold's hands gripped the armrests of his chair as he struggled to maintain his composure. I don't think you understand how carbon offsetting works, Jimmy, Arnold said slowly, his voice taking on a dangerous edge that anyone familiar with his movies would recognize. And I don't appreciate you twisting my efforts to help the planet into some kind of cynical joke. Jimmy leaned back in his chair, clearly enjoying Arnold's discomfort. I'm not twisting anything, Arnold. I'm just pointing out the obvious contradictions. You want to be seen as this environmental hero, but your lifestyle suggests otherwise. It's all about image management, isn't it? Just another role you're playing. Arnold's eyes flashed with a fury that Jimmy had clearly underestimated. The jovial, diplomatic Arnold was gone, replaced by someone who had built an empire through sheer determination, and wasn't about to let a talk show host tear down decades of genuine effort. Just another role? Arnold's voice dropped to a menacing whisper that somehow carried more weight than any shout. Jimmy, let me tell you something about roles. I've played many roles in my life. Bodybuilder, actor, politician, but caring about the future of this planet? That's not a role. That's who I am. Jimmy, sensing he'd struck a nerve, pressed harder. Come on, Arnold. You're an actor. Everything you do is calculated for maximum publicity. This environmental crusade is just your latest career reinvention. First you were the muscle guy, then the action hero, then the politician. Now you're the eco-warrior. What's next, Arnold? Yoga instructor? The audience remained frozen in uncomfortable silence. Even Jimmy's band seemed to have stopped breathing. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was a public execution. You know what, Jimmy? Arnold stood up slowly, his massive frame casting a shadow over the desk. I came here tonight thinking I was talking to a friend. Someone who understood that people can change, can grow, can try to make things better. But instead I find myself sitting across from a small, bitter man who gets his kicks tearing down people who are actually trying to make a difference. Jimmy's confidence wavered for just a moment, but he quickly recovered. Sit down, Arnold. You're being dramatic. This is just a conversation. No, this is not just a conversation. Arnold shot back, his voice rising. This is an ambush. You invited me here under false pretenses so you could attack me in front of your audience. You think this makes good television? Humiliating your guests? I think honesty makes good television, Jimmy replied, his mask of civility slipping completely. And honestly, Arnold, you're a hypocrite. You lecture people about climate change while living a lifestyle that contributes more to environmental damage in a month than most families do in a year. Arnold leaned forward, placing both hands on Jimmy's desk. You want to talk about honesty? Let's talk about honesty. How much research did you actually do for this interview, Jimmy? Did you look into the solar panels on my house? The electric vehicles I drive daily? The millions of dollars I've donated to environmental causes? Or did you just cherry-pick the facts that fit your little narrative? Jimmy shifted uncomfortably in his chair but wasn't backing down. I did enough research to know that you're not the environmental saint you pretend to be. Pretend to be? Arnold's voice was now thunderous. I have been working on environmental issues since before it was popular, since before it was profitable, since before celebrities were expected to have causes. I was promoting renewable energy when you were still making jokes about wardrobe malfunctions at award shows. The production team was frantically gesturing to Jimmy to wrap up the segment, but he seemed determined to push this confrontation to its absolute limit. That's a nice story, Arnold, but actions speak louder than words. And your actions show someone who talks the talk, but doesn't walk the walk. Arnold straightened up to his full intimidating height. My actions? Let me tell you about my actions, Jimmy. I pushed through the first comprehensive climate change legislation in California history. I created the first state-level cap and trade program in America. I brought together Republican and Democratic governors to commit to emissions reductions when the federal government wouldn't act. What have you done besides sit behind this desk and mock people who are actually trying to solve problems? Jimmy's face was flushing red now. Whether from embarrassment or anger, it was impossible to tell. I'm not the one claiming to be an environmental leader while living like a... While living like what? Arnold interrupted dangerously. Go ahead, Jimmy. Finish that sentence. Tell America what you really think. The silence stretched out painfully. Jimmy had clearly painted himself into a corner, but his ego wouldn't let him back down. While living like someone who thinks rules don't apply to them, Jimmy finally said. You want everyone else to sacrifice while you continue living exactly the way you always have, just with better public relations. Arnold's laugh was cold and humorless. You know what's funny about that, Jimmy? You're describing yourself. You sit here every night telling jokes about politicians and celebrities, acting like you're some kind of moral authority, but what do you actually contribute? What problems do you solve? What positive change do you create in the world? Jimmy's jaw dropped. No guest had ever turned the tables on him like this in front of a live audience. This is my show, Arnold. I ask the questions here. Your show? Arnold nodded slowly. Right. Your little kingdom where you get to tear people down for entertainment, where you invite guests just so you can humiliate them. Is this what you dreamed of when you got into comedy, Jimmy? Being a bully with a microphone? The audience was completely silent now, watching this unprecedented breakdown of the usual late-night format. Jimmy's producers were making increasingly frantic hand signals, but both men seemed oblivious to everything except their confrontation. I'm not a bully, Jimmy said defensively. I'm holding you accountable. Accountable? Arnold's voice rose again. Who made you the accountability police? What gives you the right to sit in judgment of people who are actually trying to make the world better? At least I'm out there fighting for something I believe in. All you do is sit here and tear down people who have the courage to take stands. Jimmy was now visibly angry, his carefully maintained television persona completely abandoned. You want to know what gives me the right? This is my show. These are my cameras. This is my audience. And if I think someone is full of it, I'm going to call them out. Full of it? Arnold leaned across the desk again, his face inches from Jimmy's. The only person here who's full of it is you, Jimmy. You're a coward hiding behind comedy, taking cheap shots at people who are actually doing something with their lives. The tension in the studio was so thick it was almost suffocating. The audience sat in stunned silence, witnessing what was clearly about to become television history for all the wrong reasons. Jimmy's face had turned a deep shade of red that his makeup couldn't hide. The accusation of cowardice had clearly struck a nerve deeper than anything else Arnold had said. "Don't you dare call me a coward," Jimmy hissed, his voice shaking with rage. "I've been doing this for 20 years. I've interviewed presidents, world leaders, Nobel Prize winners. I don't need some washed-up action star telling me how to do my job." Arnold's eyes went cold as ice. "Washed up? Is that what you think? Let me tell you something about being washed up, Jimmy. Washed up is a man who peaked making prank calls, and now spends his nights desperately trying to stay relevant by attacking his betters." The insult hit Jimmy like a physical blow. His hands trembled as he gripped his desk, and when he spoke, his voice was barely controlled fury. "My betters? You think you're better than me? You're a joke, Arnold. A muscle-bound freak who got lucky in Hollywood and now thinks he's some kind of statesman. Nobody takes you seriously anymore." The audience gasped audibly at the viciousness of Jimmy's attack. This had crossed every line of professional television decorum. Arnold stood up slowly, his massive presence seeming to fill the entire stage. "A muscle-bound freak," he repeated quietly. "Is that really what you want to go with, Jimmy? You want to mock someone's physical appearance on television? Is that the kind of man you are?" Jimmy realized too late that he'd gone too far, but his anger was driving him now, not his brain. "I'm the kind of man who tells the truth, even when people don't want to hear it." "The truth?" Arnold's laugh was bitter. "You wouldn't know the truth if it punched you in your smug little face. You sit here night after night hiding behind your writers and your laugh track, pretending to be some kind of truth-teller. But you know what you really are, Jimmy. You're a parasite. You feed off other people's accomplishments because you have none of your own." Jimmy shot to his feet, his chair rolling backward. "Get out. Get out of my studio right now." "Your studio?" Arnold's voice was dangerously quiet again. "This isn't your studio, Jimmy. This is ABC's studio. You're just another employee, just like the rest of us. The only difference is that some of us actually earned our success." "Security!" Jimmy shouted, his voice cracking with rage and humiliation. "Get this lunatic out of here!" Arnold didn't wait for security. He straightened his jacket with deliberate calm and looked directly into the main camera. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize that you had to witness this. I came here tonight to talk about saving our planet for future generations. Instead, I found myself confronting someone who apparently believes that tearing people down is more important than building anything up." Jimmy was frantically signaling to his directors to cut to commercial, but Arnold continued speaking to the camera with the commanding presence that had made him a global icon. "I have spent decades of my life trying to make positive contributions to this world, in bodybuilding, in entertainment, in public service, and now in environmental protection. I have made mistakes, yes. I have learned and grown and tried to do better. That is what human beings do." "Cut the cameras!" Jimmy screamed at his production team. "Cut the damn cameras!" But Arnold's voice carried over Jimmy's hysterics, with the authority of someone who had commanded attention on stages around the world. "What you witnessed here tonight is what happens when someone confuses cynicism with wisdom, when they mistake cruelty for honesty. I will continue my environmental work because it is the right thing to do, regardless of what small-minded people think." Security guards were now approaching the stage, but they seemed hesitant to actually put their hands on Arnold Schwarzenegger. He turned to face Jimmy one last time. "You know what the real tragedy is here, Jimmy? You had a platform. You had an audience. You could have used tonight to actually discuss solutions to climate change, to inspire people, to make a difference. Instead, you chose to use it for a cheap personal attack. That tells everyone watching exactly what kind of man you are." Jimmy was now red-faced and sputtering. "You arrogant, sanctimonious—" "Goodbye, Jimmy." Arnold cut him off with icy finality. "I hope someday you find something in your life worth fighting for besides your own ego." Arnold walked off the stage, with the dignified bearing of a man who had just won a battle he never wanted to fight. Behind him, Jimmy stood frozen behind his desk, his carefully crafted television persona in ruins, facing an audience that had just watched him reveal his true character on live television. The studio remained in stunned silence for several seconds, before Jimmy, his voice barely above a whisper, managed to croak out, "We'll be right back after these messages." As the show cut to commercial, the damage was already spreading across social media. Clips of the confrontation were being shared and reshared, with overwhelming support for Arnold and condemnation for Jimmy's unprofessional behavior. The man who thought he could ambush a legend had instead destroyed his own reputation in front of millions of viewers. Arnold Schwarzenegger had been kicked off Jimmy Kimmel Live, but in doing so, he had delivered one of the most powerful and dignified responses to a media ambush in television history. He had shown that some people cannot be bullied, cannot be diminished, and will not back down when they believe in something bigger than themselves. What did you think of this incredible showdown? Have you ever seen a celebrity handle an ambush? Interview this masterfully? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and make sure to subscribe for more incredible stories of Hollywood drama that you won't believe actually happened.